Hello and welcome to the Wealth Approach podcast. It's always joined by Michael Schneider. We have a three-part series I think is interesting, kind of a different way, a different discussion, talking about the psychology of money and how it impacts your family, how it impacts, thinking about transferring wealth, maintaining wealth and such. So I think it's a different angle that's important to kind of contemplate as you consider where you're at and where your family is going over generations.
Right. And Jared, I think you and I definitely have a different perspective than a lot of folks, just because this is our industry. This is what we do. We're very, very open about it. But again, that might not necessarily be the case for lots of people out there, and especially from some of the previous generations. And when we look at the emotional side of wealth, there are really these four scripts that have been really defined that encompass a lot of our general feelings about how individuals view money. They're again the four of them. It's money avoidant, money worship, money status, and money vigilant. And I mean the names pretty much speak for themselves. If you're money avoidant, it's why do I have this wealth? I don't really want it. I feel guilty about having it. Money worship is that it's money is the only way to, feel successful. It's the only thing that really matters. Money status is at the end of the day, keeping up with the Joneses. That it's nice, it's important to have nice things that you want to have money really just to kind of maintain that's more or less that social standing. And then money vigilant is really about money should be saved. It isn't something that's really shouldn't be brought up publicly. People really shouldn't show signs of wealth, and that at the end of the day, it's better to have a lot of money but not really do as much with it. So, again, most people aren't going to fall into a single one of those buckets, but m most of us are going to be a blend of, two or three of these as well.
Well, Michael, I think it's important consideration, right? Because to your point, it's hard for any of us to be pigeonholed totally in one of these. Because again, as you think about running your business, you might have one viewpoint. As you think about your personal financial situation, there's another. And then when you think about your kids and grandkids trying to put this together, right, they're typically a blend. And I think depending where you are in your cycle of life and where things are, it's important to have this understanding as a basis and then be able to plan and make adjustments along the way because we do believe this is an important consideration to put together overall financial planning for your family and looking at generational wealth or maintaining it because again there's a lot of moving parts and God willing as you get to each generation there's more humans, right? You grow, you expand, that family tree evolves, right? And it opens up the complexity because you have more people, you have more different personalities to kind of align your family and adjust and manage around.
That's right. That's right. And so, one thing we want to ask, everybody watching this is really, what's your own personal relationship with money? And if you have kids and grandkids, how would you define their relationship with money as well? As Jared was just saying, that the more generations down the line, the more people there are, that not everybody's going to be the same. Some might be spenders, some might be savers, some might be, very interested in say stock markets, bond markets, what have you, or investing, and some people might focus on other things. And again, it's really about how can you educate, the next generations about wealth and wealth creation. Again, that's not necessarily the only definition of success, but it is something that if you are a wealth creator and you want to find ways to maintain the wealth through those next generations, what's going to be the most effective way to do that amongst the different generations? Is when you look at kind of the typical family wealth cycle, the first generation, and we define the first generation as the uh, the folks who are creating the wealth, whether it's through work, through starting a business, what have you, just the wealth creators. The second generation are going to be the kids who witnessed the creation of the wealth and really saw what it took for, say, the parents to create that wealth that they've inherited. And then the third generation, say the grandkids, really they grew up wealthy and they might not have the same kind of connection to the sort of that first generation to see the hard work that was required to create what they have now. And again, that's really where a lot of the communication kind of comes into play. I just remember kind of growing up seeing, like my dad come home and, be late, be tired, and just kind of have the appreciation for the kind of the hard work that he did as well.
Well, and Michael, as you think about the old saying, shirt sleeve to shirt sleeve in three generations, that's kind of the general background. Obviously, it just doesn't define every situation out there. But in general, like you said, the first generation makes it, second maintains it, third, quote, blows through it, right? And then the money's gone after the third generation. And again, as you think about this, the conversation we're having today is around the education psychology to some degree. And the other important considerations are planning, right? Because a lot of money, as you go through generations, is, poor planning. So it goes to taxes and legal fees. So you take a cut. And then as you don't have the education to maintain and grow, and then on top of it, you have more people. So if there's a large pot of wealth that gets split, and then it gets split further, and if you're not buttoning all this together from a good family plan overall, and then on top of it, understanding the different personalities and connections with money and understanding as well, it's part of the reason you could see the money gone by the third generation. So our goal, as always, is to educate and go through the good and bad of situations we've seen over the years to try to pass along the thoughts so that we can continue to grow and maintain and educate going forward.
That's right. And then, to kind of take a step away from just some of the definitions and details, we want to kind of give some of our own history about, to call it our money story, our, just how we kind of grew up, the different, as we said, everybody's got a different background. Everybody has different, thoughts on money, on wealth. In my household, nobody really spoke about money. The idea of wealth was, wasn't something that was communicated between the generations. It was this, whether it was from grandparents, great grandparents to parents, it was, my kids they'll learn about it when they need to learn about it. They don't need to know my business right now. And it was always sort of important to save. But at the end of the day, too, one sort of my first kind of big money, let's call it money memory, was for my birthday. I got some birthday money and I wanted a new Game Boy Color. And so I got the birthday check, I got it cashed, went to Best Buy, picked it up, and you know, but after paying for that and the one game, I think I had 80 cents left. And that was kind of say, that's a fast way to spend $100 back in the day. So, again, it's just kind of the idea of, the where the money comes from, how, not necessarily how it was created or how it was earned, but then again, from a spending standpoint, from a budgeting standpoint, to kind of understand the value of the dollar from that perspective.
Well, and for me, Michael, like I grew up in northern Wisconsin in a very, very small town. So my first job in first grade, I had a paper route.
Yeah.
Right. So riding my bike around, delivering newspapers in the morning and afternoons. And I remember the first time I got my first paycheck, I got $20, right? And I thought I was the wealthiest man in the world, right? Of thinking about, where things go from there. And again, from the thought of teaching and talking about money, it's just was never a thing either, right? And again, one of the faults of our education system is there's very little, financial knowledge and such. I was fortunate, my high school was one of the best business high schools in the country, even though it was in the state, even though it was a small school. So I was blessed to get some of that financial knowledge in high school that is very rare these days. So it really helped with the base. On top of it, I obviously have a large interest in the financial markets overall. And again, I think, Michael, as we think about, how to talk about things with people, because again, I think educating, it's a little bit easier because, as you said, we're in the industry, and how do you get your kids? How do you get your family members that have little or no interest, to think about it. So I think some of the things I've done with my kids and some of the stuff I did as a kid growing up, it's like playing Monopoly, right? You're having fun, you're playing a game, but look at all the lessons that are involved with a game like that. You have to budget, you have to buy things, you have to trade, you have to negotiate, you
And
have to take some
hopefully not go to
risk.
jail.
Right? You have to take
Yeah.
some risk. So I think there's good ways, that parents or grandparents can quote teach about financial lessons or giving things. What's the oldest thing out there to teach kids? A lemonade stand, right? We go into your, parents' kitchen, you grab the lemonade and you go out, you set it up, you're having to negotiate and sell and make some money and make the spread. So I think there's a lot of different ways to, work with your children and family members that you're not making it boring, right? You're going to have your children or grandchildren that love it, as you said, Michael, want to talk about stocks, want to talk about the market, but that's not most people. But how do you teach overall? It's like, with my sons, I like to do sports cards, right? Number one, it's just fun. But number two, right, they're learning the same, kind of life skills of running a business to some degree, having to negotiate, having to price things out, right? Or with my daughters, it's really thinking about what interests them to, kind of get into ideas and even giving a budget and an allowance is a good way to say, what do you do with your money, right? And kind of test out your children. Some are going to take it and blow it, right? Others, you see how they operate, how they think about it, and say, here's what you need to spend. And it's kind of the old a third, a third, a third as you try to teach your kids. Here's your allowance. A third is for spending, a third is for saving, a third is for giving away. So I think as we think about, discussions within our families, especially kids and younger kids, I think there's a lot of different ways to make it interesting, appealing, fun, but the underlying lesson is within the fun that you can kind of reassess and kind of continue to educate. And again, kids, we all remember back a lot of these things, and they're good, I think, life skills that you can kind of have that balance between having the fun, but laying the groundwork for some of these. And again, as a parent or grandparent, you can kind of see how your kids interact with some of these fun activities to say, as we started that first slide, Michael, where are our kids? How do we know which bucket they could be in? What's their relationship with money, or how do they handle things? And kind of get back to, you know, where do you go as planning?
Yeah, that's right. I think what you said about which of those kids, if you give 20 bucks to goes out and spends it and saves it and who has questions about it. Again, that also makes just a lot of sense from the financial literacy standpoint to help with the overall planning and just from again, I mean, I don't know how many times we've said it, but to have that line of communication to help to teach, to help to for those kids who might not want or might not want to deal with the money, just say, okay, that's fine. Don't money doesn't necessarily define your success in life. However, if you do have money, what is the best way to use it? And if you are more on the avoidance side, what are some ways that you can still use that money for good purposes? Again, whether it's through charities or other types of philanthropic opportunities that may sort of align with somebody who has that kind of script more closely.
Well, Michael, as we talked about, this discussion, right? Some people define success in financial discipline as the largest bank account or largest amount of wealth, and that's great, right? Other people, it's just pure happiness, right? And you may not have the best paying job, but you're very happy. And I think as you think about the balance of teaching your children, how do you sustain whichever level or interest level, you're in? Overall. And I think as you understand your children or grandchildren and see what their interests are and where things are, money is definitely a tool, but it's also the education process of maintaining, what level of lifestyle and where things can be between, you know, where you are as a child and where you retire to. And it's that long-term discussion and constant education because no parent and no kid wants to daily go through, some kind of financial discussion. So I think as we think about it, these are just slow ways to be planting seeds along the way. And then, like I said, learning to where things are. And as you take a step back and you're planning out your family estate plan, you can account for some of these or make the adjustments to, balance things out. So that's why I think we're talking about the importance of the psychology of money, of having the understanding of, where you personally might be, you and your spouse versus, where your kids are, and, see where there could be more need for financial education, or where there might be more need for other avenues overall. But again, I think it's a different thought process as we think about this topic. But again, it's a very important one.
That's right.
So with that, I want to thank you for tuning this series. In the next couple episodes, we're going to go into some other topics that I think are super appealing and interesting to consider as we kind of put this whole conversation together.
Well, thank you, everybody, and we'll see you all next month.